Hello and welcome to the local campaign. I'm Cynthia Mulligan, the political specialist for City News. On October 19th, Canada will elect the 42nd Parliament, and Rogers TV is the only station producing debates of all of Toronto's 25 ridings. For the next hour, you will hear from the candidates of Scarborough Southwest. And 2015 marks the beginning of electoral riding redistribution, so boundaries in the majority of ridings have changed, along with some riding names. So before I introduce you to the candidates, let's take a closer look at the newly redrawn riding of Scarborough Southwest.
The riding of Scarborough Southwest stretches from Lake Ontario in the south to Eglinton Avenue East in the north. Victoria Park Avenue is the western edge. The eastern border is Markham Road. Neighborhoods in Scarborough Southwest include Birchcliff, Oak Ridge, Birchmount Park, Cliffside, Clare Lee, Golden Mile, and Cliff Crest. Notable landmarks: the R.C. Harris Water Treatment Plant down by Lake Ontario. Also along the lake further east is Bluffers Park. Pine Hill Cemetery, which is north of St. Clair Avenue between Kennedy Road and Birchmount Road. NDP member Dan Harris is the incumbent MP in Scarborough Southwest.
And now I will give each candidate 1 minute to make their opening statement, and this will be done in order of most seats by party in the House of Commons. And we will begin with Dan Harris with the NDP, who is the incumbent.
Thanks very much. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for tuning in. Let me begin by saying what an honor and a privilege it's been to represent you in the area where my family's lived since the 1920s for the past 4 years. My name first appeared on the ballot over 15 years ago because since the 90s, Scarborough has suffered under successive Liberal and Conservative governments. We're now so close to positive change. It's time to pick a more hopeful path for Scarborough, one led by Tom Mulcair and the NDP, one where we bring back door-to-door mail delivery and create affordable $15 a day childcare, where we bring back a federal minimum wage that the Liberals eliminated and make it a living wage at $15 an hour, where we invest in our seniors, home care, long-term and palliative care, one where we lower small business taxes and raise corporate taxes, where we invest in our youth and make long-term investments in affordable housing, transit, and infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Bill Blair representing the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Cynthia. And good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. For the past nearly 4 decades and for the last 10 years, I have served the people of Toronto and the people of Scarborough Southwest, first as a police officer and then as their chief of police. In that role, I had responsibility for managing an organization with $1 billion budget and over 8,000 employees. I was also responsible for keeping the people of Toronto safe. And I'm very pleased to say that over our 10-year period, Toronto became the safest, large, and most livable city anywhere in North America. I am now very pleased to join Justin Trudeau's team, and I am very proud to talk to you about Justin Trudeau's plan to make the largest infrastructure investment in Canadian history. We plan to create significant jobs through infrastructure investment that will build new transit and new opportunities for the people of Scarborough Southwest. We also plan on making a very significant investment in creating jobs through an investment in social infrastructure to improve housing and to relieve the burden upon the middle class.
Thank you very much. Tommy Taylor is next, and he is with the Green Party.
Hello, Scarborough Southwest and everyone else watching. My name is Tommy Taylor. I'm running for the Green Party to be your MP. The first thing I want to ask everybody who's watching is, when is the last time a politician inspired you? When is the last time that the word inspiration, creativity, or good idea was associated with a politician? It's been corruption. It's been scandals in the Senate. We really need to see inspiration and creativity return to the government in Ottawa. We need accountability. We need transparency. And we're just not seeing that with the folks who are there now, with the people who have come before, and it's time for something new. The Green Party is proposing fully costed, bold, new ideas, the kind of ideas that Canada needs to build a sustainable future. not a patchwork of little promises here or little promises there. Something new and something that gets Canada working together.
Thank you. And I must say that the Conservative candidate, Roshan Nalaratham, declined to be with us this evening. So now I am going to start with the question and answer and debate portion of our evening, and each candidate will be given 30 seconds to respond, followed by discussion. The first question this evening I will give to you, as you are the incumbent. Let's talk about manufacturing jobs. Their loss has been felt keenly in Scarborough, and we often hear governments talk about how they are going to create jobs. What would your government do, and you in particular for your riding, do to create well-paying jobs in this community?
Well, you're quite right. I mean, we've seen over 400,000 good manufacturing jobs leave over the last decade. And Scarborough Southwest has felt that more keenly than many other areas with the evisceration of the Golden Mile, which started under NAFTA and the Liberals and continued under the Conservatives with their indifference to the manufacturing sector. What we need to actually see are investments in green tech and in innovation to actually spur on the creation of the next generation of manufacturing jobs. And there's lots of room in Scarborough Southwest for many small businesses to set up to get us going, and they'll get us going well.
Bill Blair, your response.
Yeah, very good news in that regard. A Liberal government will invest $1.3 billion over the next 3 years, which of course is 13 times more than proposed by the NDP to create jobs and opportunity for young Canadians. That'll include 40,000 youth jobs each year for the next 3 years through an annual investment of $300 million into renewed youth employment strategies. We also intend to double the almost 11,000 Canadians who can access Skills Link each year, create 5,000 youth green jobs, and make a $50 million increase in youth employment strategies funding levels. These types of investments are the things that are actually going to cause our economy to grow, and they're possible because a Liberal government has made a commitment to make modest deficits over the next 3 years and investments in our country and in our economy that'll create jobs, create opportunities, and create prosperity for the people of Scarborough Southwest.
Tommy Taylor.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, we're in a jobs crisis in this country. As somebody who's 34 years old, I can tell you I've seen a lot of my friends going through this. I can see my younger brothers going through this as well. And the communities in Scarborough Southwest where I've been talking at the doors, jobs are a huge concern. One of the biggest barriers we have in this country to jobs is opportunity. Conservative and Liberal governments have bankrupted the manufacturing sector and sent it away internationally, thus participating in the disappearing middle class. Green Party, we're saying end tuition, invest in small business, end corporate subsidies to the oil and gas sector. Let's invest in our future, and it all starts with education.
Gentlemen, I'm opening up the floor.
Well, then, may I suggest, I think in order to give people opportunities through education, you've actually got to make investments. It requires more than talk. It requires action. And we propose to invest $40 million annually to create more co-op placements for students. And we know co-op placements in our education institutions create linkages to good jobs and real opportunity. One of the challenges the people of Scarborough Southwest faced is that we have a disproportionately high level of working poor in our community, and we have a disproportionately high number of people who aren't employed. We need to make those investments in the social infrastructure and in the public infrastructure of Scarborough Southwest so that people can get to work, so that we can encourage investments and development in our economy, and so that we can support those who aspire to join the middle class. It's going to take more than good intentions, and it's going to take more than talk. It's going to take investment. And the Liberal Party is prepared to make those investments.
I think it's going to take more than the same parties that have been in there time and time again, handing power back and forth. They can talk about a job creation strategy when we're in the middle of election, but they won't talk about how the free trade agreements that the Liberal and Conservative governments have signed up with have done nothing but exploit this country and see the decimation of jobs everywhere. At the Green Party, we're talking about making a sustainable generations fund. It includes, of course, reinvesting into jobs and technology because that's our future. I'm pretty sure in this country when we close our eyes and we picture our future, we're really all hoping it's not some sort of crazy Mad Max reality. We're all fighting over oil and gas and we've sold all our water and we don't have any left. collectively as Canadians, that's not the future we have in our hearts. So it's time for something new in government. It's time for bold action. I mean, we can talk about the different patchwork of systems for students. At the Green Party, we're talking nationally. Let's relieve all the student debt. Why is the government a loan shark to people who want an education? That's an investment in our future. That's what education for people is. That's going to be people who are going to be paying back in the tax system, who can take care of their families. So after
there
we
should
relieve
be no student debt, no tuition?
I'm saying relieve student debt, and then within a decade, abolish tuition altogether. There's lots for families who can't afford it. There's lots of places with bigger stresses on their systems around this world that do that. Why are we stuck in being a loan shark to people who want an education? It's an easy thing to do. It's the best thing for our future, is to have a generation of geniuses. I'll admit, maybe a little selfishly, when I'm a super old guy, I want a generation of super smart, super educated kids who can take care of me. Because right now, my generation, crushed by debt, and we've got the biggest wave of seniors coming. We want to take care of them, but the average person in this country is carrying, when they get out of school, $37,000 in student debt. Unacceptable.
Well, we would like to see investments of over $200 million going into actually boosting youth employment. Youth employment is double the national average, and of course the unemployment rate in Scarborough Southwest is above the national average. We want that to go into co-op placements, we want it to go into apprenticeships, and we want it to go into paid internships as well. It's very important to note that it was the NDP in Parliament that fought so hard over the last 4 years to end unpaid internships and to actually bring workplace protections to unpaid interns, which didn't exist before.
Let's move on to healthcare. And Tommy, I'm going to start with you because you started talking about the aging demographic.
Great.
And we are facing a massive growth in the over 65. And it is increasingly clear that our healthcare system is going to have great difficulty keeping up. Alzheimer's patients, dementia, for example, that is going to grow exponentially and be a huge cost to our healthcare system. What role should the federal government play in paying for our healthcare and managing our healthcare, and how is the government going to keep up with these enormously growing costs?
Great. Well, first of all, the federal government really needs to get back involved more with healthcare. Stephen Harper has cut and cut and cut to the point where it's not true that we have universal health care. There's a lot of things that people can't afford. People with chronic illnesses, debilitating diseases, they don't have access to the kind of medications they want. That's why at the Green Party we're saying a national pharmacare plan coupled with a national senior strategy. It's unacceptable that so many Canadians who are suffering continue to suffer when this government is more than capable. With a senior strategy with the Green Party, we want seniors to be able to stay at home as long as they like, rather than downloading a bunch of costs on the healthcare system, needing to stay in hospitals or broken home systems. There are a lot of easy ways to let seniors stay at home longer.
Bill Blair.
Well, today, Justin Trudeau announced a $3 billion investment over the next 4 years into the development, through our social infrastructure commitment, to the development of long-term care facilities and better care for an aging population. And as was just announced earlier this week, what we've seen for the first time in the history of this country, there are now more people over the age of 65 than under the age of 15. And I think that shifting demographic tells us that the status quo is unacceptable. We're going to have to make significant investments in ensuring that our seniors have income security, pension security, food security, shelter security, and access to quality long-term health care.
I'm going to cut you off because your 30 seconds are up, but we'll continue on this thought. But first, I will give you a response.
Well, our national healthcare system, of course, was founded by New Democrat Tommy Douglas when he was Premier of Saskatchewan, and he did it all while bringing in 17 consecutive balanced budgets. We need to expand upon Tommy's vision and actually see our public health care system go into new areas. Yes, we're going to have to tackle an aging population, and one of those was have an actual dementia and Alzheimer's strategy, which my colleague Claude Gravel tried to bring into the House of Commons. It lost by 1 vote because a Liberal member of Parliament didn't get up to vote for it. We'd already have that strategy in place if not for that action. Our healthcare system used to be funded about 50% by the federal government. Now that's closer to 30%, and that's why Tom Mulcair and the NDP have said we're going to boost healthcare spending by 6% each year over the terms of our mandate.
I cut you off, so I'm going to let you continue now, and you can have a healthy argument about this.
Well, I agree. One of the pillars of Canadian society and Canadian values is access to universal health care. But we have seen enormous pressures placed upon the healthcare system by changing demographics, but also by, I think, a flawed funding supports for that, and bad cooperation and lack of cooperation and collaboration between provinces and federal governments. And I really think that the situation, not that we should tackle it, but we need to find ways to support our seniors. And I think the best way to do that is for provinces and the federal government, at all levels of government, and members of the private sector to enter into really collaborative work in finding the best way forward to support our seniors and to provide adequate resources and adequate services for that aging population. One of the great challenges, I was at the door the other day, and an elderly woman came to the door, and she was very concerned about her ability to pay her rent. She'd lost her husband, her own pension income had become quite limited as a result. She was worried about her future, that she didn't have any kids or anybody in her family that could support her. She didn't know what was going to happen to her when her health began to fail, when she needed a caregiver to come in, or when she needed access into a long-term care facility. And we need to provide those citizens with the assurance that their government will be there for them and that those services will be there for them. Quite frankly, we see even in Scarborough Southwest quite a number of very, very outstanding long-term health care facilities, but they're operating close to capacity. And an increasingly aging population requires that we make investments. And these are investments that are going to require that we actually budget real money for these things. It's one thing to refer to apocalyptic scenarios and idealistic, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? But you actually have to budget for these things. You have to find a way to pay for them.
The Green Party had the first fully costed plan, released it out of any of the parties. So long before the Liberals costed their plan, we were pretty confident. We were going to wait and see which sort of hot topic issues came up to adjust our platform to. So it's been out there for a while. It's no pie in the sky. If you want to get specific about the Aging in Place program that we're doing there, we can certainly do that. But it's a fully detailed and costed plan. But please continue.
Mr. Blair brought up the flawed funding formula. We have to go back to the mid-90s for when that formula got flawed. And that was when Liberal government under Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin slashed over $20 billion from our social transfers from healthcare and education. And our system has had a struggle just to catch up from those cuts almost 20 years ago. And what we actually need to see is a new government. We need to end the revolving door between the red door and the blue door that doesn't end up getting anything done. We need to move forward. And the NDP is also proposing a national bulk drug buying program that would save the provinces and the federal government and hospitals up to $3 billion a year. It would help everybody right down to the senior that needs to go get that prescription filled. And that's part of Healthcare 2.0 that the NDP wants to move forward with.
Let's move on to income splitting. And it has been quite a controversial issue. In 2007, the Conservative government introduced income splitting for Canadian pensioners, and last fall brought in a tax benefit package that would allow couples with young children to split their income and therefore reduce their taxes. Some people have been crying out that that is only going to help the very wealthy. Where do your parties stand on this issue? I will start with you, Dan.
Well, I think you hit the issue on the head. That might be one of the reasons why our Conservative colleague isn't here tonight, because they don't want to have to answer questions about why their plan only benefits the richest 15%. The NDP has proposed to roll that back because that's $2.5 billion a year out of the federal treasury that could be far better spent on things like good quality, affordable $15 a day childcare that would actually let families make the right choices for themselves. And that's what the NDP has been proposing in order to help families to actually reduce their overall costs, not just take money and then put it back in their pockets.
Bill Blair.
Yeah, let me be very clear, because this has been part of some misleading advertising on behalf of one of the parties. The Liberal Party will not roll back income splitting for pensioners under no circumstances. That is a benefit which helps our pensioners, and we're going to continue with the policy of allowing income splitting among pensioners. But we also agree that income splitting for the very wealthy it only benefits a very small number of people, less than 15% of the population. And so what we propose instead are rolling that back and making significant changes to the way in which we tax. We're going to ask the wealthiest people, to pay a little more, so that the middle class, and by the way, that's the overwhelming majority of people in Scarborough Southwest, can pay substantially less.
Okay, that's 30 seconds. Tommy Taylor.
Well, I think the time has come that we come up with a tax strategy that works for the 21st century economy. This boutique selection of tax cuts and bonuses and benefits just relates to an overly complex, overly pricey, and completely inequitable system of taxes. Income splitting, yes, definitely needs to be taken off the table, except for in the case of senior citizens. But I would say one of the big things in taxes that the Harper Conservatives have done is lower that corporate tax rate, and that is putting a huge burden on the rest of Canada.
I'm opening the floor.
Well, I mean, the corporate tax rate, I couldn't agree more with the Greens that rate needs to go up. The NDP is the only of the three main parties to have committed to actually raising corporate taxes because Canadians are paying their fair share. What we need is the corporations to pay their fair share so that can be invested back into people, back into infrastructure and transit, and all the services that corporations make use of in order to make profit. And they need to be paying their fair share. And we also agree that we need to end the subsidies to oil and gas that are preventing us, frankly, from making the kinds of investments we need into new technologies so that we can build that sustainable future.
Economists have warned us that increasing corporate taxes, as proposed by the NDP, will eliminate 165,000 jobs across Canada. I don't think at this time, when so many Canadians are struggling, that we should be putting so many of those jobs at risk. I think it's equally interesting that we propose to increase the taxes paid by the most wealthy, and yet the NDP does not support that. And as well, we also propose that we would cut back sending checks to millionaire families just because they have kids, and that we believe that there is no sensible reason to send that money to the very wealthy when it can be more valuably invested in families that are struggling and trying to make ends meet for their kids. And so we believe that that should be a benefit that is, in our childcare benefit, more specifically targeted to those in need and not simply to the most wealthy.
So what we're hearing from the Liberals is let's leave the corporations where they are. They're doing fine. They're really good community members. It's kind of a fallacy that Mr. Blair is promoting here. It's a common misconception. A lot of American companies, for example, that have their headquarters here in Canada, they have to make up the missing remainder of corporate taxes from their home states, paying up till they've reached that actual percentage level. Raising it by a few percentage points from 15 back up to 19, when we used to be close to 30 once upon a time, is not going to send businesses running away screaming into the night. If anything, it's going to benefit Canada greatly and make this a lot more of an attractive country for businesses to set up their headquarters.
Corporate Canada right now is sitting on over $600 billion of dead money. Money that's been given to them by successive Liberal and Conservative governments, cutting corporate tax rates without putting any provisions for them to create jobs in order to get that extra profit. And instead of investing it in research and development, our R&D rates in Canada are anemic at less than 2%, when in the United States it's closer to 5%, despite higher taxes. Because they have to work harder to get that profits. We have Liberal and Conservative governments that just keep throwing money at them, good money after bad, instead of actually putting changes in place to make sure that they would invest that in job creation or in research and development or in investing in new products. And that's one of the reasons why our economy hasn't been as efficient as it should be.
Cynthia, I think that we should make decisions about investments in our economy and growing our economy based not on ideology and not on a political calculation, but on science and evidence. And we have consulted very extensively with economists, and the best advice that we've been given with respect to investing in our economy and growing our economy is that our corporate tax rates are at an appropriate level, and that any significant raising of those corporate taxes would result in the flight of jobs from Canada, which will directly affect Canadian workers and the quality of people's lives in this country. And so, quite often we'll hear ideologically driven arguments, but we think public policy should be evidence-based. and it should be
Well,
based
Mr.
on
Blair
a
doesn't
thorough
believe
discussion with
that,
communities.
actually. Carding, for example, is not an evidence-based policy that he pushes. The science and evidence is actually against carding. When the police are asked for their database material, they cannot provide it on carding. They give anecdotal evidence as to, well, it helps solve this case or that case. People across the country and across this province are calling for that. So when he talks about evidence-based policy, historically, on his record, that is not something that he pushes.
Well, and Mr. Blair's like to talk about the fact that fear is the greatest danger. But there you have him playing that fear card, that if we dare to tell the corporations to pay more, that they're going to run away from Canada. They're not going to run away from Canada because we have a great and educated workforce, because we have good social programs, because we have good quality of life. Those are things that are value added in the Canadian sector. You know, we have great internet, we have great services. That's why companies come and set up in Canada. And I mean, we do need to maintain a competitive corporate tax rate, certainly. But we've got a lot of wiggle room between what our tax rates are and what they are in the United States, which is our closest neighbor, but also competitor for many of these jobs. And moving the rate from 15 back up to 17% isn't even as high as it was when Stephen Harper took office. But it will put billions of dollars back into the federal treasury that we can actually put to use to help people in Scarborough Southwest make ends meet.
Bill Blair, as the former police chief, would you like to respond to the carding issue?
I think it's really important that we maintain this focus tonight on the concerns of the people of Scarborough Southwest.
Who have talked to me a lot at the door about carding and about Bill C-51. So please continue.
Tom has his issue.
Billy.
I'm sorry, Tommy.
Thank you.
Tommy has his issue, and that's fine. But in my conversations with the people of Scarborough Southwest, they're worried about their kids. They're worried about their income. They're worried about their quality of life. You know, they want to see good transit. They want to see investments in social infrastructure. They want to see
the black community is protesting in the streets. There are headlines in the newspaper. Why are you pretending this is not an issue?
Tommy, I didn't interrupt you. They want to see investments in healthcare. They want to see investments in seniors' care and in their schools and in opportunities. And I think that it's really appropriate and necessary to keep the focus in this election on things that are actually relevant to this election.
So the message to the black community would be that carding is not relevant, your civil liberties are not relevant. Mr. Blair, over 2 million people in recent years have been stopped. The majority of them black residents in this city. There's no data. Why do you defend it? Why haven't you provided the data? I mean, you yourself, you hired a team of lawyers at taxpayer expense to look into carding. They were going to give you an opinion on whether or not carding should end. You used taxpayer money for that, and you have never told us the answer. What did your lawyers say that you paid for with our money? What did they say about carding?
I'm going to switch the conversation from carding because we are discussing federal issues. Let's switch to childcare.
Civil liberties,
charter, on that
the charter.
One.
I'm sorry,
me?
Cynthia.
I would have liked to have gotten in on
I'll give
that
you
one.
10 seconds.
Thank you very much. When I go and talk to the folks in Warden Woods, they certainly have many of the concerns about their children's future, but they have an additional one, and that's oftentimes the fear of getting stopped by the police randomly. We have parents in those neighborhoods who walk their kids to the bus stop for fear of being harassed by police. And that's fear that's actually keeping people in their homes and away from being productive members of society.
I will give you a chance to respond, Bill Blair.
Thanks very much, Cynthia. If we're going to talk about when I was the police chief, we might as well talk about what we actually achieved when I was the police chief. I became the police chief in 2005. And for the 10 years of my tenure, we created the most diverse police service anywhere in North America, one of the most diverse in the world. I had a rule in my police service that half of all the people that we hired would be women and or members of our visible minority communities. My officers speak, and 2/3 of them speak 2 or more languages, 1/3 of them speak 3 or more languages. We have worked tirelessly to improve the quality of our interactions with the community. We worked in a 2.5-year project that was co-sponsored by myself and Barbara Hall, the Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, in order to improve our response and our interactions and to ensure that all of our policies, procedures, and training were compliant with the Human Rights Code. We have worked tirelessly, and we've been consulted by police services all around the world. I have never suggested that our interactions are perfect. I have always worked hard to do better. We believe better is always possible. The Toronto Police Service.
Public trust in the Toronto Police has lowered to dropped by 20% and has never gone up during Mr.
Tommy,
Blair's.
I didn't interrupt you. The Toronto Police Service has worked to help make Toronto one of the safest and most livable cities anywhere in the world. We have consultative committees with all of the diverse communities, and our police service truly is diversely representative of the diversity, not only the ethnic and racial diversity of this city, but the diversity of perspectives that it represents. I'm very proud of the work that the men and women of the Toronto Police Service do, and I have been committed throughout my entire career to ensure that our officers treat all of the people of our city and our communities with the respect that they deserve, that we uphold the rule of law, and that we keep them safe.
People in this city actually are less safe thanks to Mr. Blair. The policy of carding, harassing innocent civilians, has made people in communities less willing to talk to police.
Okay, I believe we've made our point on carding, and we've given a chance for a response.
Nice if we got an answer.
I want to move to childcare. It is a key issue for many families, and it does set the parties apart on how they would deal with it. We know the Conservatives want to mail checks to families. They've increased that in recent months. The NDP is going to create a $15 a day childcare, national childcare system, which the Liberals had once upon a time promised but were unable to deliver. Not $15 a day, but they did try to do a national childcare strategy. But the NDP policy would not actually be able to come into effect for a full 8 years, 2 more elections away. How are you going to get all the provinces on board to pay for it? Because that's crucial to it implementing it.
Well, it will take 8 years to create 1 million new good quality affordable childcare spaces. And I actually started my career in childcare at Corvette Public School. I know firsthand the importance of that good quality regulated care that can help children in their early years, but most importantly help families to be able to make ends meet. The reason why we'll be able to get buy-in from the provinces is because of the economic benefits, but it also means going and actually meeting with the provinces to hammer out a deal that's going to be to the benefit of all. In Quebec, they've actually found that their economy grew by 2% when they brought in affordable childcare. 70,000 women were able to re-enter the workforce in order to help make ends meet. This plan makes sense from an economic perspective, and that's what we'll be taking to the provinces. And of course, you do have to factor in the differences that exist in some provinces. Ontario, of course, has full-day kindergarten, so it's not going to be the same one-size-fits-all in Ontario that it might be in another province. But of course, you have to meet with the premiers, and Tom Mulcair has said he'll sit down with the premiers twice a year in order to hammer out agreements on all of the important issues that are facing our Confederation from coast to coast. And we've had 10 years of Stephen Harper ignoring that, and you're quite right. We did have a failure from successive Liberal governments. They promised childcare in 1993, they promised it in 97, they promised it in 2000, which was the first time I ran, and then they promised it again in 2004, and they were never able to deliver.
Yeah, unfortunately, when we attempted to bring it in 2004, the NDP voted against it. But let me just say...
Jack Layton forced your hand and forced you to cancel corporate tax cuts in order to get a budget through that included some childcare.
A 2-year-old child in Scarborough Southwest today will be in grade 5 by the time the NDP is able to deliver on this promise, and their delivery is entirely contingent on support and very significant funding from the province. The Premier of New Brunswick today said no one had even asked him, and he certainly doesn't support it. And so there are many, many significant impediments. What we propose instead is a significant investment in the working class people who need the resources today. And so with a new Liberal government, we'll put more money through significant tax cuts and our childcare benefit into the pockets of the people who actually can benefit from it right away, so that they can make investments in raising their kids. And they can make choices too, instead of waiting for a government-funded spot that may open up in 8 years or may not. They can make decisions with respect to a parent's decision to stay home with the kids, perhaps having the kid raised or in the care of a grandparent or another adult. There are a number of different ways in which the children can be raised in our communities, and we want to make sure that families that need the resources have it now. And we're going to do that through significant reduction in their income tax and through significant additional monies available to them through our child care benefit. And we're going to do that by not sending checks to millionaires and not, keeping major tax increases away from the wealthy. We're going to ask the wealthy to pay more, so
Corporations aren't wealthy?
So that working class people can have more money available to them to help them raise their kids now. They can't wait. And I don't think it's right to ask them to wait. The need is, when we go to the door,
I'm going to interrupt and let Tommy Taylor get in here.
Yes, Canada needs a plan for childcare that has flexibility. Now, of course, the Greens, we're 100% a federally funded childcare program so that any parent who wants to put their child into early childhood education has the ability to do that. But the program needs to have flexibility. So the Greens are talking about working with employers to make child-friendly care spaces at people's jobs. It's been shown in many studies, the more time that parents get to spend with their children, the better off we all are, whether it's economically speaking, societally speaking. And the great thing is when you offer these tax benefits to the employers, they're more willing to get involved, and you don't have the cases of it being an issue to be a parent and work at certain locations. It's going to take creativity, it's going to take inspired thinking, and we're also talking about partnering that with a national housing strategy, because you can hand out all the benefits you want. If a kid doesn't have a roof over their head, doesn't matter.
Mr. Blair talked about 8 years, and yes, it's going to take 8 years to create 1 million new childcare spaces. But the NDP is committing to getting 60% of that done in the first 4 years. That's 600,000 spaces. And Mr. Blair talks about a kid who needs childcare now, who's 2, who's going to be in grade 5 by the time they got it. If his Liberals had actually brought in childcare in '93, the first time they promised it, the kids that were born there that are going to be becoming parents now would be able to access it, but they don't, and they still can't. And of course now the Liberals have said, well, that's just too hard for us to get done. The NDP is up for the hard challenges. That's why we want to be the next government in Canada and actually make the right priorities for families.
But still, correct me if I'm wrong, the provinces would bear much of the burden of a national childcare system.
Not much of the burden. We're looking at a maximum of 40% from the provinces, and that's 60% of the costs.
That's not insignificant for provinces which are struggling to maintain their budgets.
It's not insignificant, and I mean they are struggling to maintain their budgets, and that's why we're going to help them in a lot of areas with long-term stable funding in order to help those funding issues. But getting, in Quebec, 70,000 women back into the workforce, an increase of the GDP of 2%, that helped provincial coffers, that helped to grow their economy so that they were actually able to pay for those programs. Quebec's been doing it on its own without any federal assistance. What we're proposing is to actually bring the federal government to the table for the first time in a generation. We've been promised childcare by Brian Mulroney, by Jean Chrétien, by Paul Martin. Even Stephen Harper promised to create 125,000 childcare spaces. I was a kid when Brian Mulroney was Prime Minister, and I'm 36 now, and there's still no childcare plan in place. We need that program for a 21st century economy, especially in cities like Toronto, where the vast majority of families need 2 incomes in order to make ends meet. But both the Liberals and Conservatives are washing their hands of that, and they're going to leave childcare costs in Toronto at between $1,600 a month and $2,000 a month. Doesn't matter if you get $6,400 or if you get the Conservatives $2,000, you're still paying $16,000 to $20,000 in childcare costs. That's another mortgage. It's only the NDP that's going to bring that cost down to families to a maximum of $15 a day.
Cynthia, a plan that doesn't have a budget isn't much of a plan. And quite frankly,
it's going to cost $5 billion. It's been out for a year, Bill. You should have read about it by now.
Well, you probably got a pretty good idea what it might cost. You just don't have a clue where the money's coming from, because asking
raising corporate taxes.
Asking the provinces to come up with 40%
Done.
and
Took me 2 seconds, and you still can't answer about carding after several years.
Which is an excellent point and very, very true. I think we've had enough of people who can't answer questions in Ottawa, but please, Bill, continue.
But a plan for childcare spaces that doesn't have a plan for actually paying for those spots isn't much of a plan. It's smoke. And the plan that we have put forward, the plan that we have put forward is a plan where we've already talked about it, and it's well costed, and it's been put out. And Kevin Page, who was the parliamentary budget officer, has very clearly said that it is a well articulated plan for our budget and for spending. And we have the money, and we've said very precisely how it'll happen.
You don't have the money, you're borrowing the money.
It'll be money that ends up in the pockets of the residents of Scarborough Southwest. It's going to make a difference in the quality of their lives in the new year. And they can't wait 8 years for the help. And so we're planning on making the investment now and growing
spots in 4 years.
And growing our economy by investing in Canadians, investing in infrastructure, investing in creating job opportunities, investing in those communities and their quality of life
Saves us $7
today.
down the road.
Let's talk about deficits. It is one of the issues that separates the parties, particularly the Liberals, who are the one party that will actually commit to going into a deficit. The NDP will not, they will balance. Where do you stand on how you're going to pay that money back in time after 2019?
What we have said is that over the next 3 years, we will have modest deficits of $10 billion a year. But we've also got very accurate projections from economists, and which have been backed up by the research, that the debt to GDP ratios will be declining over each of the 3 years, and we will return to a balanced budget in the fourth year. But we believe in making an investment now. And I think we've been very cautious in our estimates. We have not included increased government revenues as a result of the investments we make. But we know if we make investments in infrastructure and create jobs, and there'll be a number of different other opportunities in businesses that will develop and grow around that. And
Tommy Taylor, sorry, your time.
I was just going to say I'd be a little wary taking that financial advice. I know a modest amount of $10 billion. It's quite a bit. There's a lot that's coming into this country right now, and it's just misspent. And I think $10 billion is quite a large sum. It might not be for Mr. Blair, who during his time at the Toronto Police as chief, the police budget inflated by 46% up to $1 billion. So I guess also, what is that, $1 billion security price tag at the G20? $1 billion is an amount that he feels comfortable just sort of throwing around like that. Fact is, there's a lot of money that's coming in. If we restructure how taxes work in this country, if we take a look at where we are shuffling off all these corporate subsidies, there is a lot more that can be available there. It takes creative thinking, not throwing all the money out.
No, well, I mean, the Liberals think that $10 billion a year isn't very much. But let's look at Stephen Harper's term. We've added $150 billion to our national debt, and the Liberals are saying we're going to boost it up another 20%. Somebody's going to have to pay for that down the road. And this is where the Liberals, budgets balancing themselves comes in. Only if everything is as rosy as been put on will they ever get close to balancing that budget. The NDP, following in the footsteps of Tommy Douglas, who brought in 17 consecutive balanced budgets while creating Medicare in this country and a Bill of Rights, among many other achievements, showed us the way. But what we'd like to see is, and what we've factored in, is a $4 billion buffer a year to make sure that we stay into balance. And if things aren't as good as we hope they'll be, we'll still be in balance with that $4 billion buffer. If they're better than that, then we'll be able to accelerate program spending. But what we need to do is be prudent fiscal managers in this time. And Department of Finance documents have proven that NDP governments, time after time, have the best record in Canada of balancing the books.
I think we should get more local. Let's talk. Did you want to add one thing?
If I may,
I'll give you one moment.
I'm the only one at the table who's ever managed a significant budget. And
out of control budget, I wouldn't call it managed.
Well, Tommy, you know very little about that budget, so I won't debate it with you. But let me tell you,
that was quite the dismissive hand
but
gesture
only
there, Bill.
Well, you don't know much about a lot of things, apparently, like what your own lawyers told you about carding, Bill.
Mr. Mulcair and Mr. Harper have both committed to maintaining a balanced budget. Mr. Trudeau believes that Canada needs a bold vision to grow our economy and to invest in Canadians and invest in opportunity in this country. And we are prepared to make those investments. We are prepared to not from the top down, not based on some political calculation on where the investment gets you a vote, but working with municipalities. And we've met with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and they support this investment. Working with provinces, working with communities, and working with our business community to invest in this country, to grow this country. We have confidence in Canada. We have confidence in Canadians, and we believe that with that investment, the country can be better. Now, some have told us that maintaining a balanced budget is the most important thing, and the way we are is good enough. We don't think it's good enough. We think better is always possible. And we think an investment in this country can make this a better, more livable country for all of its citizens. We're prepared to make that investment, and we're prepared to do it in partnership and with the support of our cities, our provinces, our communities, and with the business community.
Investment is important, but we only have to look at the example in Ontario currently happening right now, where Premier Kathleen Wynne made a lot of promises in the last election campaign, and now she's going about financing them and finding the money for them by selling off Ontario Hydro. Even Mike Harris backed off of that. So my question would be, what are the Liberals going to sell off to pay the bill at the end of the day after they've made those investments?
Let's move to a more local issue in the riding that you each hope to represent. Scarborough Southwest is indeed a riding of contrasts. It has very affluent people living there and some who are far more at risk. And it brings up the question of crime and punishment. In terms of safety and security, do you think that there needs to be a tougher approach to criminal justice, and how would you approach crime and safety in your riding? Tommy, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I think a lot of the time Scarborough gets a really bad rap. A lot of the time, a lot of crimes are just labeled Scarborough, Scarborough, Scarborough. And we've had crime rates dropping across this country. I think what we do know, the terms of crime prevention, what's being done in the riding is not working. Here we come back again to the issue of carding. If we're going to talk local and we're talking crime, then yes, carding is a relevant issue, Mr. Blair. It does not prevent crime. You cannot prevent any evidence, and what it does is it oppresses innocent people in the community. We need more community-based policing, that's for sure. We need to take the advice of all these agencies that have been reporting to Mr. Blair to get reforms for years and years and years who he's ignored.
That's time.
Yeah, thank you.
Dan, I'll start with you next. First, I must ask, do all of you live in the riding?
I currently live in the riding, and my family's lived in the riding since the 1920s when it was all still farmland.
And I do not currently live in the riding, although I was raised in Scarborough and raised my family there.
Ever in the riding?
I do not live in the riding, but I was born and raised in Toronto.
Okay. Dan, I'll give you the floor.
Well, I mean, I said it a few minutes ago that $1 invested in early childhood saves us $7 down the line. What we need to do is get involved in a lot more prevention, and the best prevention is to actually give opportunities, especially to young people, to actually change their lot in life. If we have strong communities, and if we have good paying jobs, then a lot of the problems lessen. Because then less people feel that there's an out in order to try to go and make money or engage in criminal activities. But certainly, I mean, we do need to make sure that our cities are safe, and the NDP has committed to putting enough funding forward to hire 1,900 new police officers across the country in order to deal with inflation.
Bill Blair, we can get into this conversation deeper in a moment.
Yeah, I spent my life in public safety and making and keeping Toronto safe, and that includes all of its neighborhoods, including all of the neighborhoods of Scarborough Southwest. I think one of the challenges we faced in this country is I think we have fallen into a trap, and I'll refer to the current government, of thinking that tough talk on crime somehow gets the job done. And I will tell you that a Liberal government will engage in smart action on crime. And that will involve ensuring that resources are properly invested in communities to create opportunity. In my experience, the real correlations with crime are poverty, unemployment, lack of opportunity, poor housing, social exclusion, and isolation within our communities. And so we need to work on those things to make our neighborhoods stronger places, better places. The neighborhoods that work and are safe are neighborhoods where people are not afraid of public spaces, not afraid of interacting with each other, and have confidence in their community.
I interrupted the other and called them time, but let me ask you one question. As the former police chief, Justin Trudeau wants to legalize pot. How do you feel about that?
Actually, let's be really clear. What the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau have proposed is replacing the criminal sanction with legalization and strict regulation. That's so often left out of the discussion, and I can't understand why people are having some difficulty with this. Strict regulation has been recommended by a number of very significant scientific research reports. A report by the CAMH in October of 2014 strongly recommended the elimination of the criminal sanction to be replaced through strict regulation. We have as our goals to keep marijuana away from kids. And right now, the evidence is overwhelming that Canada has one of the highest rates of marijuana use among its youth in the developed world. We want to keep it away from kids. And in Scarborough Southwest, we really want to keep organized crime out of it, because the organized crime and the street gangs and the street violence that is associated to that marijuana trade is causing all sorts of violence and victimization and terrorizing our neighborhoods. And we also want to facilitate a robust public health response, because marijuana can be a dangerous drug, and particularly when it's being used by young people. The best way to achieve that is through strict regulation. And we have a good model in Ontario. We have a model of regulation with respect to the sale of other intoxicants like alcohol. And the decision to sell marijuana right now is being made by some gangster in a stairwell or somebody in a schoolyard. The decision to sell a bottle of booze is being made by a responsible adult working in a government store. And so we believe that through regulation, we can control access to children to keep it away from kids. We can take organized crime out of it. We can reduce the violence and victimization associated to it. We can control where it's sold, when it's sold.
Dan, would you like to respond to this?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the NDP has long been a proponent of first decriminalization to make sure nobody else is going to jail for smoking a bit of pot, and then creating that path towards legalization. We do need strong regulation, but we have some challenges to overcome as well. The ability to monitor, the ability to actually measure impairment in drivers is a challenge that has to be overcome. And we do have to figure out the regulatory framework about what the appropriate age to allow people to start smoking. Because I remember a Senate report that was a Liberal majority report suggested 16 is the appropriate age. And I don't think there's too many people out there that think that that's the safe age to start smoking pot, because the human brain is still developing. And therefore, why would we create a separate number? But definitely, we need to decriminalize and move towards legalization and taxation.
Tommy Taylor.
Yeah, for sure. Legalize it, regulate it. It's well overdue. It's kind of strange that we're still having this conversation. And I guess we just sort of have a unique opportunity. I'm just wondering if Mr. Blair, as his time as a police officer, if he regretted or felt bad each time he would arrest someone for marijuana possession or use and ruin their lives, send them off to the prison system, or endorse the system for so many years. And it seems now that he's a Liberal candidate, feel a little different about that. I'm just wondering if he could go back. I mean, like, would he push more for those laws to change? He feels very obviously adamant about it now, that it shouldn't be something that sends people off to jail, but willing part of a system that did that for a very, very, very long time.
And in fact, I worked in drug enforcement for 9 years, and as the head of the detective branch in Toronto, I oversaw the drug squads, and as the head of the Toronto Police Service, I also had responsibility for drug enforcement. The job of the police service is to enforce the laws of the country, but what we have seen overwhelmingly is the evidence. And again, I think we should have evidence-based policy.
Except when it comes for carding. Let's just remember that.
There's an echo in here. The overwhelming evidence.
That's because
is the overwhelming evidence with respect to marijuana use is that it's a very dangerous drug for kids, and that the current criminal sanction is not working. And by the way, that CAMH report I cited also said something rather significant with respect to Dan's perspective on this, and it said that decriminalization is a half measure that does not address any of the social harms associated to the illegal sale of marijuana use.
I would also like to say this is also not an answer to the question that I asked. These are a lot of rehearsed talking points. People deserve answers.
I think the research is clear, and public policy with respect to this particular issue should be based on science. It should be based on research, and it should be evidence-based. And so we believe that evidence is there, and that's why we propose replacing the criminal sanction with strict regulation, because we believe it'll achieve all of our public purposes of keeping it away from kids, reducing the violence associated with the organized crime involvement in it, and it will facilitate a robust public health response. Right now, the public health community cannot really get in and deal with some of these very significant health issues and other social harms associated to marijuana use because it's enveloped in a criminal sanction. And so we just think we can do better.
Well, Mr. Blair heard only, it would seem, half of what I said. I said we have to move and decriminalize immediately so that people don't go to jail anymore for simple possession. And that's a big social harm that would be immediately ended. And then we have to actually sit down as adults and figure out that framework to make sure that we find the right balance that keeps Canadians safe, that keeps it out of the hands of kids, that we're able to actually measure impairment in drivers so that we can keep it out of drivers and off the streets, and also that we regulate and tax it afterwards. But you have to decriminalize now and then figure that rest of the path out. The Liberals like to skip that second part of it, just like he only heard half of what I said a few minutes ago.
And of course, no one's proposing skipping anything, and my leader actually articulated very clearly today, we will begin the work immediately of working with provinces in order to establish those regulatory frameworks, working with the scientific community to make sure that we do this right. But it requires you actually have to act. You can't just take little baby steps and maybe we'll do something in 8 years. You actually have to make a decision on what is the right thing to do for Canadians and then begin the hard work of getting it done.
Tommy.
Yes, well, I think evidence-based is a word that keeps coming up, and we've seen it with Mr. Blair just not happen. And with the Liberal Party on a whole. We can talk about carding or we can talk about C-51. Pretty much every civil liberties organization, numerous lawyers, experts on the Charter who have said C-51 is a disaster. Like the Canadian Civil Liberties Association cannot say enough about this. And I know Mr. Blair will say, well, you know, maybe we'll make some changes. And that's the gamble that the Liberals took with Canadian civil liberties. Hey, vote us in and we'll make sure we change that thing we voted for. They're trying to, hold us hostage. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's unnecessary laws that...
We have 30 seconds before we go to our closing statements. I'll give you each 10 seconds to respond to Tommy.
Yeah, actually, I think the Canadian government has two responsibilities. They must keep their citizens safe, and they must always respect their rights and freedoms. Only the Liberal Party proposes to do both.
Dan.
Well, Mr. Blair says he doesn't think that any of the powers and mandates of C-51 go too far, including week-long periods of preventative arrest. And we have somebody in the room here that's experienced preventative arrest, and he's no terrorist.
Yes, I was arrested
That
at
would
the
be
G20,
Tommy.
and Mr. Blair has argued for C-51 the powers of expanded preventive arrests.
I'm
I have an arrest sheet at home that says preventive arrest. There was no
Okay.
accountability and transparency. He wants to take it national. Very dangerous.
I'm afraid our hour is drawing to a close, so now we have to move on to our closing statements. You can get your last word in then. This time, we will do them in reverse order of the opening statements, so we will start with Tommy Taylor.
I have no prepared written closed statements. I wanted to see what happened here this evening, and I was hoping I was going to hear a variety of inspiring visions for this country. Instead, I've heard more of what we see out of Ottawa, particularly from Mr. Blair, obfuscating on the truth, not being accountable, blocking transparency. And I'm very concerned for the residents of Scarborough Southwest when we see here a man whose legacy is making Toronto a less safe place, whether it's through the G20 inaction on Sami Yatim or what we see every day in the Black community with carding. Scarborough Southwest, you deserve better. Look for better.
Bill Blair.
I have been a public servant for nearly 4 decades, and I decided to enter into politics because I wanted to continue to serve the people of my city and the people of Scarborough Southwest. I will make a commitment to you that I will work tirelessly, as I have for nearly 4 decades, to continue to improve the quality of your lives and to represent you effectively in Ottawa and with all 3 levels of government.
Dan Harris.
Thank you. In opposition, the NDP achieved a lot, including a ban on microbeads polluting our environment, a ban on pay-to-pay fees companies charge in order to get your own paper bill, and the end of the discriminatory tax on feminine hygiene products. We'll accomplish so much more together by re-electing me and electing a Tom Mulcair-led NDP government. I'm Dan Harris, the Member of Parliament and NDP candidate for Scarborough Southwest. Thanks for tuning in.
Gentlemen, I want to thank each of you for joining us this evening for our rather spirited discussion. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. And thank you for joining us on the local campaign. Airtimes for other debates can be found on rogerstv.com. I'm Cynthia Mulligan. Goodbye for now.